Hey everybody, Mr. G back again. So today we are going to be looking at Romeo and Juliet, and like yesterday, the monologue is in the description below. Take a moment to pause me and read it. I know it's a bit of a long one, so please just hang in there. We will get through this. So this monologue is spoken by a character named Mercutio, who is one of Romeo's best friends, and also is related to the local prince, so he's very high status, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So let's dive right into the literary analysis. Now, this one, first of all, we're going to notice that it comes out in Act 1. Now, that means, remember, Shakespeare's plays all have 5 acts, so this is Act 1, the very beginning of the play, and in fact, this scene is the first time we have ever seen or heard from Mercutio. He has a handful of lines before this monologue, and then suddenly, boom, a giant speech. So here's the thing. This speech does very little to advance the plot of the play. So why have it? Well, it's Mercutio's introduction. This monologue tells us a lot about who Mercutio is. It, first of all, tells us that he likes to hear the sound of his own voice. And we see that throughout the rest of his play up until his, spoiler alert, untimely death. It also shows us that he's very fond of imagery and wordplay. Basically, this idea is you have this giant monologue that's full of pictures and images that Mercutio is crafting for his friends and for the audience. And that tells us how his mind works. It shows us that it works very quickly to create these pictures, to create these images. There's also a very interesting one, and again, this goes into Mercutio's character, is he lists all these different professions. A parson, which is a preacher, a lawyer, courtiers, who are people who work with upper class and royal people, which shows he has an upper class background, because during Shakespeare's time, only the rich really would have been working with lawyers and things like that. There's also a really long section of it, comparatively to everything else, about soldiers and war, which could lead you to think that maybe Mercutio spent time in battle. Now, the other thing that we should know about this, I did say that this did very little to advance the plot, but it doesn't do nothing. In fact, this comes along, Romeo, Mercutio, and another friend of theirs, Benvolio, are all about to go crash a party, and Romeo, just before this, is saying, nah, I really don't want to go, I'm not feeling it, I'm having a rough time. And Mercutio's basically going, no, you're going with us, you're gonna have fun at this party, and we're gonna do this. And Romeo talks about, dreams, and is trying everything he can to switch the conversation around. And then Mercutio unloads this on him and says, you know what, hey, here's the dream lady. She's obviously visited you. She does all this stuff. And after this is when Romeo finally relents and goes on to this party, which is where he meets Juliet. So really and truly, without Mercutio and his blabbermouthing, we probably wouldn't have the rest of the play. Now, let's look at this from the character perspective. Again, we talked about he's very high class, so he's used to hearing himself talk without being stopped, because who's going to stop the royalty, basically? So that's one thing. 2, we know he's very quick on his feet because he's rattling off all these different images and ideas, so he's got a very quick wit. As an actor, since this is his introduction, we know nothing else about the character up until this point. So what we have to do is we have to decide, how are we going to introduce him? What are we going to do to make Mercutio stand out and make him important? Because he really is for this play. His life and death are kind of major things for this play. Because when he dies, that's when everything else starts falling to pieces later on, is when he dies. So we have to give him some kind of life, some kind of energy, some kind of reason for the audience to care about him. And I'm going to take a look again, like I said yesterday, about this idea of the moment before. We haven't met Mercutio yet, so the moment before is up to us as the actor. Now, what we do know is Romeo and Benvolio found out about this party. They had to have told Mercutio, and Mercutio was probably like, party! Yes, let's go do this thing. That also will tell you something about the character, or at least the choices I'm making with the character. So, here we go. My interpretation of Queen Mab. Oh, then I see Queen Mab hath been with you. Oh, she is the fairies' midwife, and she comes in shape no bigger than an agate-stone on the fore-finger of an alderman, drawn with a team of little atomies athwart men's noses as they lie asleep. Her wagon-spokes are made of long spiders' legs, that cover the wings of grasshoppers, the traces of the smallest spider's web, the collars of the moonshine's watery beams, her whip of cricket bone, the lash of film, her wagoner a small, gray-coated gnat, not so big as a round little worm pricked from the lazy finger of a maid. Her chariot is an empty hazel-nut, made by the joiner squirrel or old grub, time out of mind the fairies' coachmakers, and in this state she gallops night by night through lovers' brains, and then they dream of love, over courtiers' knees that dream on courtesies straight, over lawyers' fingers who straight dream on fees, o'er ladies' lips who straight on kisses dream, which oft the angry Mab with blisters plagues, because their breaths with sweetmeats tainted are. Sometimes she gallops o'er a courtier's nose, and then dreams he of smelling out a suit, and sometimes she comes with a tithe pig's tail, tickling a parson's nose as he lies asleep, then dreams he of another benefice. Sometimes she driveth over a soldier's neck, and then dreams he of cutting foreign throats, of breaches, ambuscados, Spanish blades, of health's 5 fathom deep. And then anon drums in ear, at which he starts and wakes, and thus being frightened swears a prayer or two and sleeps again. This is that very Mab that plats the manes of horses in the night, and bakes the elf locks in foul hairs, which once untangled much misfortune bodes. This is the hag when maids lie on their backs, that presses them and learns them first to bear, and making them women of good carriage. This is she. And that, in its entirety, is Queen Mab. We'll see you again tomorrow. Bye.